What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central podcast, and we are going to be recapping the series that just happened against the San Diego Padres. If I recorded this, if we started this like an hour ago or so, I probably would be throwing my chair across the room right now. So you're not going to get that from me, and I apologize for that. But we're going to talk about obviously the fact that they split, but I mean, who even cares right now about the first three games? Because there's a giant shit stain from this last game here, and that's probably where the big chunk of the discussion is going to occur with this podcast episode. Before we jump into everything, please be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoy it, or the live stream I should say. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on Met Central. To open, I honestly will just give quick thoughts, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have many, considering the fact that the only game I was able to watch in full was game 3, where they won that game 7-1. Outside of that, I didn't get to watch any of the games in full, but I collapsed at dinner tonight when I saw that Jackson Merrill walked it off. When I saw Niko tweet he's gonna walk it off there, and then it happened a minute or two later, it felt like I died for a second. All I could say is this: this is just the same story as it is year after year with this team when they are in the playoff hunt, where it's one step forward, two steps back. The Braves finally lose a game, and after winning 2 games, I think all of us would have said going into the series, a split would have been, you definitely want more and you need more, but at least you could tolerate a split. But after you win those games, and after you're up 2-0, and your entire arsenal is available of quality relievers, you have to win that game. And that's not what happened. And the Braves lost. The Mets could have gained ground. Didn't do it. I see a lot of people blaming Mendoza, and I agree to an extent that some of it is his fault. But at the same time, I can't, justify blaming him fully when Jose Budo's been a rock for them most of the season. And the only counter I could say is Phil Maton needs to start getting more high leverage outs. And then with Edwin Diaz, and this goes back to the conversation that I have had ad nauseum on this podcast, with Edwin Diaz, and obviously he blew it and didn't have it today at all, so it probably wouldn't have mattered regardless. But I am still trying to understand, if he was brought in for a tie game on the road, to me that means he's probably available for more than 1 inning. Why is he not facing the higher leverage guys in the lineup? Because that's the thing that, again, Mendoza's been doing all season long that has pissed me off nonstop. Why is it that he's not in the game to face Jerickson Profar? Like, right then and there, Profar should have had to face Edwin Diaz. Like, go to your high leverage guys against the high leverage part of the order. And it just, for some reason, Mendoza is allergic to doing that, and it's a huge problem. But then there's the other side of this, where I'm having a hard time blaming the pitching fully when the offense, quite frankly, has been like, listen, outside of game 1, and I know they won 7-1 game 3, the offense didn't really impress me that much in that game. I mean, Lindor had the grand slam and backpacked the team in that game, and then you had the home run from Harrison Bader, and outside of that, like, the offense was meh at best. Like, you probably win like 3-1 on a normal day, 2-1 with the offense there. Maybe it's a closer game because your higher leverage guys are there, but the offense, again, just really not good enough. JD Martinez, at least he responded to being dropped in the lineup, but really didn't matter. And the last thing I'll say is this: I know that I mentioned after game 3 I was fine with where they used Nunez, but man, would it have been nice to have Nunez today.
Yeah, so it's a tough, devastating loss. Like, there's no other way to be around the bush with this one. Like, the season is not over because they lost this game, but it's a type of loss where it derails the momentum and it just tanks the team morale in that locker room. That's what it could potentially do. Could they potentially bounce back from this? Yes, they could. We'll see. But I think, listen, and I said this before when I was doing the post game recaps before heading into this series. I said, get me a split against the Padres. And going into it, like if you said, shake your hand, give me a split, I would have fully taken that. But because of the circumstances, because they took two out of the first three, you're like, and especially since because they were so close to winning this game, they were up 2-0 in the bottom of the eighth, and you're like, you just need 6 outs, and they couldn't get those 6 outs. But you win the first two out of the three, right? And winning last night's game was so big because David Peterson goes out, he tosses 7 innings, another quality start from him. The offense scores 7 runs, a big game from Lindor, and you take 2 out of 3, and you're like, that Saturday game is so big because you look at the Sunday's game ahead and you saw Quintana's pitching, and you're like, okay, because of how shit Quintana's pitched lately, you're like, probably that's going to be a loss. But you got to give credit to Jose Quintana tonight. So well done to Jose Quintana today because he gave you 6 1/3. He gave you a very quality outing. Didn't strike out anybody, but it was a lot of soft contact, a lot of pop outs. He did his thing. And the three reasons why I look at this game and why they lost is because one, the offense didn't show up. Like, sure, like people who look at the box score, they can say, oh, but the Mets scored 7 runs in the first and the third game. So the offense did show up. But if you really looked at the games, no, not really, because in the first game, it was a 3-1 game for most of it. Then for some reason, Mike Schilt decides to throw in Gillespie, who's one of his worst relievers, and credit to the offense because naturally, if you're a good offense, you should take advantage of lower quality pitching. They did that cool. They put up 5 runs and they extended the lead to make it 8-1. Second game, they got completely shut down by Joe Musgrove. It wasn't even close. He dominated them. It was basically a repeat of game 3 of the wild card in 2022. Third game, cool. You score 7 runs again, but again, 5 of those runs came courtesy of Francisco Lindor. 1 grand slam and a solo shot later in the game. And then today again, other than the 2 solo shots that they got from JD Martinez and Mark Vientos, they really didn't get any other offense. And they missed a big opportunity in, I believe it was the fourth inning. So it was after the JD Martinez home run. There was 2 outs and Martin Perez loses the strike zone. He walks Iglesias, he walks Terrens, and he walks Bader to load up the bases with 2 outs. Now I don't want to kill Francisco Lindor here because he's been the Mets' best player so far this season, and in the second half he's put this team on his back. But you got to drive in at least a run or 2 there to at least give Quintana at least a cushion there. So I don't want to kill him, but he should have driven a run there. Second of all, like you said, the bullpen failed. Budo, he had a shaky outing today, and he had a shaky outing against the Orioles, so it's 2 back-to-back shaky outings. I don't want to say I'm too concerned, but I wonder if this is a factor of the Mets potentially running his arm into the ground, similar to what we saw with Dednell Nunez and Reed Garrett earlier in the year. And, he's a big bullpen piece, and if the Mets now lose him to any kind of injury, then you can kind of throw any hope of a playoff spot out of the window because Budo is such a big contributor to this team. And obviously Diaz just threw a terrible slider over the plate to Jackson Merrill, and he absolutely destroyed that pitch into right field. And third of all, it's not a huge reason, but it is there's a small part. Mendy did make some questionable decisions with the bullpen. I think for me, we'll go over it, but for me personally, I would not have let Quintana go out there to pitch the start of the 7th inning. I'm like, cool, you got 6 innings from it. Don't push your luck. Don't push luck. You know what you got from it. Let Budo start that inning. Thankfully, that didn't come to bite him in the ass, but yeah, he should have put in Diaz to pitch to Jerkson Profar. He didn't. Budo gave up the run, and that also started the downfall of this game.
Yeah, and once Machado got that single, like right then and there, it should have been pull the plug on Quintana at that point. Like you mentioned, it makes no sense at all why you're leaving him in at that point. Again, though, like it does also go back to the point where there is something to be said about the fact that Budo just didn't have his stuff today and couldn't find the zone. And that also leads me to the question of maybe they should use Budo in the 2 innings thing and then let him get like 2-3 days of rest, because If that's what's going to work for him at this point, it's fine. At least you could swallow it better with Nunez healthy. But it's just infuriating that, he's been a horse for you all year and then this is the game. But a lot of the discussion is going to go to this comment exactly because this is where I really wanted to segue a lot of the discussion to, in the fact that Eric Chavez, he needs to go after this year. Along with Jeremy Hefner, I've seen enough from both of them to know that this is going to continue if these two are around. Like, I've seen enough from both of them. Like, Eric Chavez couldn't handle the pressure of being a bench coach. And I'm sorry, but right then and there, you should have just cut ties with the guy. Like, if he can't handle being a bench coach, I know a hitting coach is a lesser role, but why is he still here? And that article that came out this morning about how Alvarez and how he's trying to make him more of a contact hitter because, we don't want you to, live and die by the home run. There's a lot of outside noise that he's trying to be too power happy. Like, shut up. Your job is supposed to be maximizing talent here, and you're minimizing it. You're minimizing a tool that you have in Alvarez. His game is pulling the ball and hitting for power, and we're in 2024. Like, I'm sorry to Chavez, but this isn't the days where he played and it was, the Derek Jeters who he played with of the world where, just hit 300, get your singles, and get on base. That's just not how baseball's played in 2024. Stop trying to make Alvarez something that he's not, and it's hurting him. It is hurting the team, and I would say it's hurting his confidence behind the plate even because he's been worse defensively lately. He's been terrible, and Diaz, I don't know if it was true, but I saw somewhere that apparently Diaz looked pissed at Alvarez after the game, and even when he's been catching Katana lately, it still hasn't been, it wasn't the same as it was. And I don't know if that's a confidence thing or what, but Chavez needs to go. It's the same thing with Pete Alonso, where he's changed his approach and there's been a regression because Chavez talked about in the spring how he wants him to be able to hit to the opposite field a bit. What are we talking about here? Why are you diminishing what these players could do for you and limiting their potential? And Brandon Nimmo, maybe there's a correlation with his slump there as well. It just makes no sense at all why Chavez is still employed right now. And if he's not gone by the end of the year, I quite frankly don't expect anything to change next year. We're going to see the same things because it's the same issues that we've seen with this offense. It's the same issues that got them eliminated in 2022. And the worst part is this comment exactly. He makes excuses and never holds himself accountable. Instead of saying, putting his hand up and saying that, it's my fault. I need to get the most out of the hitters and I'm not doing that. It's, the weather, the humidity, the outside noise. When is it on you? When is it on you? And when are you going to be better? And then Jeremy Hefner, I mean, we could have that discussion another time. Tonight's probably not the night as much considering the fact that outside, I mean, the pitching was pretty bad, obviously in game 2 and in today it really hurt you. But Jeremy Hefner too, it's just with both of them, it's the same issues that occur year in and year out. And I've seen enough from both of them to know, why should I care next year enough if it's going to be the same things with those two and the same issues with these players?
Yeah, like you said, it's the same issues we're seeing in 2022, where they're not hitting home runs. Apart from that little span that they had, where they had one of the best offenses in the league, but at that point when they were on that hot stretch, they were hitting home runs. Now it's like, apart from a few here and there, we've really stopped seeing them hit majority of home runs. We've seen them more go back to regular base hits, and that's just not going to work. And the thing with the Alvarez one is that's disgusting. Like, you should lose your job just on that. Because why? You're not maximizing talent, and you're not maximizing talent of a guy that could potentially be a franchise cornerstone for many years to come in Francisco Alvarez. Like, that's his game. His game is hitting home runs. Maximize that. This is like similar to like what Gerard Gallant did with Alexi Lafreniere and putting him in a bottom 6 role to try to develop his defensive qualities. Like, sure, okay, like I understand like it's important to work on all aspects of the game. But if you're really good at something, put him in a position where he could excel at those attributes that he has. Let the guy pull the ball, let him hit home runs. Because ever since the start of the second half, he's just been terrible. And I thought that the walk-off home run against the Orioles would have sparked them,
Me
but
too.
it hasn't. And then back to the defense point, I think this is something similar that we're seeing with Gary Sanchez. And I think Alvarez was already a baseline better defensive catcher than Gary Sanchez. But I think the fact that they're working and trying to teach him so hard to frame and steal strikes, I think that's really taking away from his defense behind the plate. Because, like I said, it happened with Gary Sanchez. The Yankees wanted Gary Sanchez. They wanted him to work so hard on stealing strikes behind the plate that he really, couldn't work on anything else of his game, and that hurt him. And I fear that's what's happening again with Francisco Alvarez. And really, that skill is going to become redundant when in a couple years when the automated strike zones comes in, and you're not going to need to steal strikes because they're not going to get calls wrong. But yeah, guys like Hefner, guys like Chavez, there needs to be major changes in that coaching staff. I fully expect there will be, and I'm trusting Stearns to go out there, search the coaching market, search guys who are interested in the job, and we'll see who he brings in to replace those guys. But they cannot come back next year because we'll just see more of the same stuff that we've seen this year and more stuff that we've seen prior years, and we know it hasn't worked.
And this comment too, it speaks a lot of volumes that they have two hitting coaches, and neither one of them are good at what they do at all. I mean, Barnes is also just terrible. I mean, it's just I don't understand how these guys stuck around when Buck got canned. Like, typically when you bring in a new face, it's let's rebuild the entire coaching staff and overhaul everything. But for some reason, these guys stuck around when why? Like, why did they stick around when they clearly aren't good enough? And clearly, there's a correlation with the fact that guys thrive once they leave. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. Like, and guys aren't even in the majors anymore that came here. They got killed, like Vogelback. They got like Darren Ruff and all these other guys. They come here, suck, and then that's the end of their careers. Like, neither one of them have jobs anymore. And, obviously there's blame to be had that it is on the players sometimes, but it goes hand in hand. It goes hand in hand here that these guys, it's just not a correlation. Like, Ben Gamble has more RBIs in the past 4 games than Marte does since coming back from the injured list. Ben Gamble has an 1,000 OPS with the Astros right now. What are the Houston Astros? One of the smartest organizations in the league. I mean, it's not a correlation at this point. And like we talked about before, and like you're saying, Stanley, Hefner needs to go. And like I said before, I mean, at the end of the day, I could rant about this nonstop, but the reality is it's pointless if they just don't do anything, because if they don't do anything, then that's a bigger problem in the off season. But we'll see what happens there. That's a whole separate conversation. But you're right. You're 100% right, and I agree with the fact that the Alvarez thing alone should get a guy fired. And the worst part is, because you compared it to the Lafreniere situation, the worst part is at least it's somewhat defendable that you want to make a hockey player have a well-rounded game. Alvarez is already good on both sides of the ball. Why are you diminishing like his offensive ability? It just makes no sense. And he's starting to lose his way out of the role. Torrens, though, I mean, he hasn't been much better because he's not hitting well. Granted, if you're going to play a guy, I guess play the better defensive guy, and that's been Torrens lately. And then on top of that, JD Martinez, still inconsistent as all hell. Pete Alonso, inconsistent. Brandon Nimmo, it was nice that he had a nice little week or so of hitting. He's kind of regressed back to what he's been since the All-Star break. I mean, you're not getting consistency from this lineup unless it's Lindor. You're just not getting it. And I know he was, struck out in that big moment in this game, but there's a lot of issues here. And I don't know. Like, I don't want to sit here and say that the season is done, because when you're 2.5 out of the wild card, the reality is it could take a hot stretch and that catapults you in. But there's this part of me that is seeing enough that's becoming trends with this team to where this is just who they are right now. Like, this is just what it is. And I don't know how it gets better. And it's only getting worse now because, as we'll move on, Paul Blackburn got hurt in this first game. He sucked, or not in the first game, the second game, I apologize. But he sucked in that game. And he's injured now. And now we're going to have to watch Tyler McGill pitch. So it's only getting worse with the pitching and stuff like that. So, and I know Alvarez is playing hurt, but again, a lot of this is on coaching that they're trying to change his approach. But yeah, Blackburn got hurt in this game, so we'll have to see. It's probably going to be McGill, even though it should be Sproat getting the next start in that in the turn in the rotation. But it is what it is at this point. We're going to have to just get Tyler McGill thrown in our faces until we're dead. And yeah, I mean, outside of that, I don't know if there's really anything else to take away from the series as a whole, unless you have anything else with that.
This is not really more of this series. This is kind of looking ahead because obviously, like you said, Blackburn's out. He went on the 15-day IL with contusions in his hand, so he's gonna miss at least 3 starts at most. But because I was listening before we did this podcast, before we came on here, I was listening to Evan Roberts on his Rico Bro podcast, and he actually brought up a very good point with the upcoming games and the pitching rotation so far. So if you look ahead right now, obviously the Mets have the day off tomorrow. They don't play. They then travel to Arizona. You have Minaya and Sevy going in the first 2 games. Now, because you have the off day tomorrow, going into the third game of that series, or even just every game, every pitcher's going into that game on regular rest day. So, because that would have been Blackburn's spot if he didn't get hurt. Now, most likely, like we said, McGill's taking that spot. However, what the Mets should do to give themselves a better chance at winning, you flip Peterson, who would have gotten the Friday game against the White Sox, put him in the final game of the D-back series, and put McGill for the first game of the White Sox series. Because I'd rather see, even though McGill still sucks, I'd much rather see him pitch against the White Sox than against a very good and offensively dynamic Arizona Diamondbacks team.
That's what I was just going to say. With the off day, the Mets have to take this to their advantage with the rotation and switch things around that McGill does not face the Diamondbacks, because there's no way you're serious about making the playoffs if you're trotting out Tyler McGill against the Diamondbacks. You're not winning.
No, you're not. And even though it should be Sproat up here. I mean, even if it's not Sproat, they couldn't put in Joey Lucchesi to pitch. Like, I'd much rather see Joey Lucchesi at this point than Tyler McGill. I know what McGill is. He's a minor league pitcher at best.
Yeah, or I mean, it just sucks that Christian Scott isn't ready to come back yet, because that would have been really nice to have him at least on the way back. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. At this rate, I'd rather at least roll the dice with Lucchesi and hope you get something better versus Tyler McGill, who is what he is at this point.
Although I was intrigued with the news that came out before the series and this is kind of similar to what happened with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets last year, where if the Mets are close enough towards the end of the year, we could potentially see Kodai Senga come back late in the year. Now, this is, like I said, similar to the Rodgers Jets point, because if the Mets are out of it by the end of September, I don't want to see Senga pitch, because
even last year with Diaz.
Yeah, there's no reason to rush them. But if they're still in it and they're only a couple games back, then by all means, you got to throw in Senga in there, because he gives you a much better chance at winning those tight games later on in the year. And especially when the last 2 series, the second last series you're in Atlanta, and the last series you're in Milwaukee. Now at that point, Milwaukee, they might already have clinched the division, and they probably will because the rest of the NL Central sucks. So I'd assume the Brewers would probably rest some of their guys, but still, I'd much rather throw in Senga into those games than anybody else.
I agree with that, and it's similar to what we heard with Diaz last year. How if the Mets were to like in the event that they would get in themselves into a playoff position, this was obviously early in the year because they took themselves out quickly, but in the event that would happen, Diaz would probably come back towards the end of the year, and yeah, that's the only way I'm even bothering with bringing Senga back. But with this series, I mean, I would even say right now, I would roll the dice with an opener. Like, I'm not joking. I'd rather an opener right now than Tyler McGill. I'm that sick of watching this crap with them. And I think a lot of that would have to dictate, of course, how the first two games go with the bullpen. But if they don't have to utilize the bullpen that much, I'm sorry, but I'm in a spot where I would rather just watch them use an opener. Like, I know that you could say it's burning your bullets, but you should be beating the White Sox anyway. You should be like, you shouldn't need further bullpen aid, like that much bullpen aid to beat the White Sox. I'm sorry, but it's just the truth. But I don't think that's gonna happen. At the end of the day, I honestly think that it's wishful thinking to even say they should flip him and Peterson, because it just is what it is with this. Like, at this point, they're just gonna do what they normally do with Tyler McGill and just force him to start against quality opponents. And yeah, Quintana did pitch a decent game at least, but we'll see how that goes through the second time here, of course, or we'll see how he's next time in the rotation. But again, with this series coming up, I don't know, like, what, I didn't even look at the pitching matchups yet, which I'm gonna do right now. If you want to add anything while I do that.
Well, no, I was saying because the Tuesday game it's Benai versus Eduardo Rodriguez. Wednesday is Sevy versus Fat, and then Thursday it's Nelson, and the Mets haven't announced their pitcher for Thursday's game yet. But I think looking ahead, you got 3 games against the D-backs and 3 games against the White Sox. Minimum, they got to go 5-1. Anything less than 5-1 is not good enough. You got to take 2 out of 3 against the D-backs, and you have to sweep the White Sox. I'm sorry, if they lose a game to the White Sox, then they don't deserve to make the playoffs. And I know I've said this before because I called it a couple weeks ago, and I said the series that really scare me is the series against the teams like the A's, the White Sox, and the Rockies and the Angels like that, because I know this Mets team. I've watched them for years. They're like the Rangers. They play up the competition and they play down the competition.
Anything less than 5-1 in this stretch, I mean, I realistically, you're out of it at that point, because sure, the Braves play a bit of tougher opponents this next week here, but you're at the point where after this loss, because if they won this game, you're at 69 wins. The Padres are at 73. And that changes things. Like, this loss just changes things so much, and that's what's just annoying, because you go 5-1, that puts you at 73 wins, and you're still behind the Padres, you're still behind the Diamondbacks at that point. Like, you have to go 5-1 here. There's really no alternative than that, because you got to win this series against the Diamondbacks, because those games, of course, mean more than the White Sox ones. And then like you mentioned, they have to sweep the White Sox. If you don't sweep the White Sox, like you mentioned, you don't deserve to make the playoffs. So you're unserious. 4-2, you could maybe live with a little more, but if it's anything less than 4-2, they're done here. Like, I'm sorry, I'm done at that point caring, because how am I supposed to believe that you're gonna beat teams like the Atlanta Braves down the stretch? How am I gonna believe that you're gonna win these important games against the Phillies? Like, I don't know. That's just my opinion on that.
No, yeah, I mean, for me, 5-1. I think anything less than 5-1 is not good enough, and I think you're just throwing games away at that point. But I think a guy that we got to give some credit to, and he's continued his amazing season so far. But one smart decision that the Mets did make was when Nimmo was struggling, and we brought it up, move Vientos into the 2 hole. And ever since that, Vientos has just been killing in the 2 hole. I mean, I'm just checking Fangraphs right now. This isn't updated with today's game, but since Vientos has moved into the 2 hole, like I said before, this is not including this game, 286 average, 303 on base percentage, 571 slugging, and a 905 OPS with a WRC plus a 153. The guy's killing it. You're giving him more pitches to hit by hitting him up in the order, and he's just crushing it right now. And moving him up has only helped him because I think it was starting to slow him down a little bit, batting him lower down the order because he'd mostly hit like 7 or 6. And if you're an opposing pitcher and you're like, okay, Vientos is coming up, but you look around the guys in the order over there, like you have guys like Bader, Iglesias. I know McNeil's been better recently, but if you're an opposing pitcher and Vientos that low, you're like, okay, let me work around Vientos here and let me see if I can, get to the other guys and potentially get those guys up because they're probably easy outs. But since they moved on to second, he's batting behind Lindor. He's got other guys in front behind them like Pete and JD, which that you can't throw him at meatballs exactly. And he's getting more pitches to hit, and he's taking advantage of the opportunity to move up to the 2 hole. He's been playing really well so far. And of course, he hit the home run today again. So that only brought up his numbers.
Yeah, and it's just infuriating that Nemo's ice cold right now. Pete's ice cold right now. And then even Marte's being put in the top of the order for God only knows what reason. And all these guys are just cold while you have Vientos thriving right now because it would just make the top of the lineup insanely deep right now. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And it's just so infuriating. Could this offense just put together the stretch they did in July and June for just a week or two? Like, please. I'm just begging for it. And then obviously in October. But yeah, shout out to Vientos, though, at least who's been producing. In terms of the next discussion, because I really don't even want to talk much more about this series and stuff. We'll move on to a discussion that's worth talking about because Brett Baty got injured and he's probably done for the season. So it does make it interesting, though, because you might be saying, why does it matter that Brett Baty got hurt? Well, because September call-ups are right around the corner. And at that, now I got to ask you, who would your September call-ups be as of today? Because I have my 2 guys, but I want to hear yours before I list mine. Obviously, one's going to be a pitcher, one's going to be a bat.
I mean, the pitcher, it's obvious it's Sproat. I want to see him up here, and I want to see him throw. My position player would probably be Drew Gilbert, but Carson, friend of the show, he brought up a good point where the Mets have such a deep outfield right now in terms of just names. I know not all of them are producing, but I mean, you got Nimmo, you have Bader, you got Marte, you got Taylor, you got Jesse Winker. It's really if Drew Gilbert's not going to come up here and he's not going to perform, you just don't want him to sit on the bench. You rather him be in AAA and develop more and get even more at bats because he has missed a big chunk of the season so far because of injury. So yeah. So while I would like it to be Drew Gilbert and I would like to see him have a couple of bats up here, if he's not going to perform and he's just going to sit on the bench, I'd much rather him stay in AAA.
These were my 2 guys, and my counter to the Drew Gilbert thing is that Starling Marte is not doing anything for you right now. Jesse Winker is not playing every day right now. Tyrone Taylor barely sees the time of day anymore. And I know that would obviously change, you could argue that would probably be Drew Gilbert, but my counter is you have Harrison Bader who's struggling as well right now. Taylor's not playing because he's been struggling. Marte's been struggling. Why not give a spark plug to your outfield a bit? And maybe instead you could move one of those guys to play the DH every now and then, because JD Martinez isn't exactly lighting the world on fire. And the other discussion is like, what alternatives are there with the bats? Like, you have Luis Angel Acuna, like that's it. Because I mean, your options are very thin outside of that. Like, you really don't have a lot to work with here in terms of the bats. And then with the pitching wise, I'd like it to be Sproat, but realistically, I expect it to just be Alex Young or Brazabon. Like, I really don't expect much on the pitching side, but I would like to see them give Gilbert a shot. But knowing the Mets and knowing what we have to deal with, we're gonna have to see more DJ Stewart, and I'm gonna want to throw shit across my room.
You don't want to see DJ Stewart take some pinch hit at bats or some DH appearances, really?
Yeah, maybe if it was August last year, but not currently. But yeah, I really am not sure if there's anything else to discuss right now. I mean, I know we're only at 36 minutes, and typically we go for a lot longer, but I really don't like. I'm just annoyed. I'm more annoyed than anything, and I don't have a lot to discuss here, unless you have anything else you wanted to bring up and add.
There is one thing. I know most likely Shohei Ohtani will win NL MVP. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but I think Francisco Lindor should really. I think the voters should really give Francisco Lindor some love and really give him a lot of votes for the NL MVP, because the Mets would not be here if it wasn't for Francisco Lindor right now. And not only should the fans start chanting at Citi Field more MVP when Lindor comes up, but I really think the fan base should start making a push for Lindor to be named the captain of this team. Because, like I said, if Lindor hasn't been producing the way he has been, and I know he started the season really bad, and he was part of the reason why the Mets got off to such a bad start, but he's put this team on his back so far, and he's one of the main reasons and the biggest reason why they're up at this point and why they're potentially in a playoff spot right now. I mean, like, if we're going to compare the numbers, right, and this is the first 65 games of the season, Lindor was hitting 231 with a 298 on base percentage, with a 402 slugging percentage, 700 OPS, and 100 for a WRC plus. You take a look at the next 65 games, he's improved that to a 307 average, a 382 on base, a 577 slugging for a 959 OPS, and a 169 WRC plus. Make this guy captain. He plays every day. He gives you gold glove defense, and he's hitting out of his mind right now. And he's one of the guys. And even like a couple days ago when the Jeff Passan article came out, and and he was talking about it with Lindor and stuff, and Lindor was saying, like, my job's not finished yet until I'm giving Stephen Alex Cohen the World Series trophy. And even then, the quote that I really loved after was when he said, but in New York, no one's going to remember when you win it. You know why? Because you have to go out there next year and do it all over again. I love that so much. That's the type of mentality that you want to see from a captain and a leader in your clubhouse or locker room. Give this guy the C next year.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. And he has come such a long way from the thumbs down thing and all that other crap that we saw from him the first few years, where he didn't get the way New York is. Like, he didn't understand, why we boo you and all that stuff when you're struggling and all that other stuff. He didn't get it, but now that he understands it, he couldn't be embracing it anymore than anyone else, and that's why we love him. That's exactly why we love him, because he gets it. Like, that's all it is with New York. Because people are like, oh, it's tough to play in New York, this and that. Somewhat true, but we're also so easy to win over. All you have to do is say the things Lindor does and go out and give your all and perform. Like, It's all you have to do to win us over, and just understand when we're booing you, it's because we know that you're better than what you are providing. We boo you because of that. And he has come a long way since then. And yeah, he's not going to win MVP, but if he's not the runner up, it's definitely a disgrace, because he deserves at least to be that. But yeah, that's really it, honestly, for the positives, and just in general. Like I said, if you have anything else to add, let me know before I wrap it up here, of course.
No, that's really it.
All right, so sorry for a little bit of a shorter episode. It's tougher when they, leave a shit stain in the last game, but that is going to be it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back, obviously, to the regularly scheduled programming of doing these after each series. We will be on Mets Weekly on Thursday evening. If you guys want to check us out there, with friend of the show Carson, we will be on with him as his guest. I'm just gonna assume that he couldn't get anyone else, so he called him the backup, probably more like the 10th string option, but he called us in. We'll be there on Thursday, so if you guys want to see additional coverage from us, that is where it's going to take place. But go give them support anyway. They do a great job over there with their weekly show. But that is going to be it for us here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Met fans. Turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live on the channel here. And we will see you guys in the next one.